Good to see you back here for this Business of Apps live online event. We've got Braden and Jesse here ready to kick off. We're going to be talking about how to launch App2Web Monetization ASAP. Very excited for this. So good to see everyone. Hi, Joe. Hi, Omar. Hi, Emily. Hi, Tala. Hi, Andrew. Just, say hi in the chat. It'd be great. Great to know where you're calling in from today. How's the weather looking? And we're going to get started very shortly. Little bit of housekeeping. We'll be doing a bit of Q&A at the end if you've got some specific questions you want answered. So you can leave those either in the chat or drop it. There's a little box, Q&A box. We do have a little poll actually as well running, asking if you're currently doing App2Web monetization. If you've just joined us, maybe that's your first port of call, say hi in the chat and let us know where you're calling in from, and then maybe go into that poll button on the side, which is the little graph one, and answer our poll, which is asking you, are you currently doing App2Web monetization? Yes, no, but we plan to, or no. Great. I'm already seeing some votes coming in. Great. That's fantastic. And hi, Amazon. Yeah, good to see everyone. Okay, great. We've already got a question from Mohammed. Great. Well, fantastic. All right, well, the questions are coming in. The chats are coming in. I'm going to hand you over now to Braden and Jesse to get on with the content. So, yeah, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. We're excited to talk a little bit about Epic versus Apple and spoiler alert, Epic versus Google as well, and talk about App2Web monetization and how it can benefit your apps. Quick intro, I'm Braden Steele, Senior Product Marketing Manager at FastSpring. I've been doing a lot of work with the mobile apps industry, mobile gaming as well. And so I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about this topic. And we also have Jesse here.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here with you.
So let's get started. Let's go over to our agenda. We'll keep an eye on the chat and try to respond as well if we can throughout if there's questions specific to slides. But as was mentioned earlier, we'll be having a Q&A at the end. So if we want to go to the agenda slide next. So what are our topics today? We kind of have three sections that we're going to talk about. First, we'll talk a little bit about an overview of App2Web. What does the landscape look like? What are some things that you need to know about App2Web as a concept? And then we'll move on to why most of you are here is how do you actually launch an App2Web program in the United States? And we'll talk a little bit more about specific rules around App2Web and steering. You'll hear that term a lot today as well. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about monetizing web to app outside of the US, again, related to the rules that are in place right now around steering. So that's our agenda today, a lot to cover, so we'll dive right in. So the landscape, what's going on right now? What do the regulations look like? Well, first, what's in place today is in April of this year, judges ruled that Apple in the United States was not allowed to prevent apps or users on their app store from steering users from in-app to a payments page online. And so that's what Epic versus Apple is. That's the App2Web steering ruling that has allowed this new channel to become available to so many people and to so many businesses. So what exactly does that mean? Again, really specifically, you're now allowed to send users directly to a payment page on your website from in-app, and you're allowed to clearly message in-app that that's where you're sending them in the United States on iOS. Previously, you couldn't do that. And so what's coming next is on October 22nd is the date that appears to be when it will go into effect. The same will be allowed on Android in the US, and you can begin to send those users from in-app to payments pages on your site. And then later this year, Japan has introduced their Mobile Software Competition Act, which appears to also unlock steering on both iOS and Android. So This is really exciting for the mobile apps industry because you can now open up this new channel and advertise this alternative flow for users to transact with your business. And you also unlock a lot of user data, which we'll talk about as well as we go through.
We want to take a second just to acknowledge whether you began on the App Store or on the web, this is a big deal. App2Web is new for all players. Talking to mobile apps is an interesting kind of group because some of us launched our businesses on App Store. We're only App Store, and we may not even have a developer page. Like, we are app only. There's a lot of businesses, of course, that launched as a web-based platform and then added apps later. There's, of course, modern, more contemporary businesses that have just launched everywhere. What's that movie? We're all at once or whatever. But it doesn't really matter for all players. What Braden was just describing with the legal rulings offers a brand new kind of path to purchase for everyone. So this is a big deal. Also, a quick side note, because I didn't take advantage of it when you handed me the mic briefly earlier, Braden. My name is Jesse Poliato. I work with demand generation at FastSpring. So I spend a lot of time looking at marketing and user acquisition and all those sorts of things. So really, really pumped to be with you guys today. I wanted to show a slide with some data on it. This is part of a survey that we conducted with mobile app companies, specifically gaming mobile app companies recently. You'll notice in the title, what were the main reasons for adopting a D2C web store? D2C stands for direct to consumer. It's the lingo that the gaming vertical tends to use for what more broadly we call app to web or steering, or the overall concept of sending traffic right from an app to a web store page. And you would think, if you were kind of tracking with what Braden was describing around the new legal landscape, that a primary reason to send traffic directly to a web store is to avoid the fees that you have to pay in the marketplace. Apple, Google, they're going to charge you between 15 and 30% for any transaction that they facilitate. Interestingly, if you're looking at the screen, it's number 3. Profits was actually not the main driver. It was a big driver, but the number 1 was improved access to customer data and insights and gaining more control over pricing and promotions. So the real value that businesses were seeing was, I get access to the data from my users. And we had an event just a week ago in Helsinki where we had this boat party, which was super cool. I didn't get to go to it, but a couple folks from our team did. And there was somebody with a mobile app that had a game, and they were really pressing one of our people. They're like, well, what data? What's the data that I'm going to get if I drive traffic directly to my web store? Like, what do I actually get? And the answer is email. That is the number 1 piece of data that you're going to get that's highly valuable. There's a lot of other stuff: geography, platform, language, name. There's a lot of stuff that you can utilize, but the number 1 is always getting access to people's email. So let me hand this back to Braden to get into the details here.
Yeah, so let's dig in a little bit to some of the implementation and how you actually build a program like this. Let's go back really quick. Yep. Sorry, you jumped ahead of me, and I got a little lost. But here we are. So
it's coffee, man. Cup number 2 is going.
Yeah, exactly. So as Jesse mentioned, we've been talking with a lot of companies about App2Web, and I have found that many companies have a little bit of concern about using this flow for a number of reasons. Number 1, are you going to be in violation of terms of service, or is Apple or Google going to get mad at you because you're using this flow? Well, the reality is App2Web isn't as scary as you think, and it's a channel that you should be using. And companies have been finding success with this for 6 months now, since the ruling came down in April. So if you're not already doing it, you should genuinely be considering how you can deploy an App2Web flow and test it out and see how it works for you. So we'll move on then to what are the steps that you need to do. There's kind of 4 steps broadly that you need in order to redirect your users to an external web store without paying that marketplace commission, or in order to access that other customer data and other things. So the first step in that journey is you need to add a buy button in the appropriate place in your app that links to your checkout experience or your store. And that button can be, if you have a store page in your app, it can be, maybe on your paywall somewhere. That'll be up to you where you want to put that button. But that button can be, again, in the United States or where steering is allowed, very clear on what your users are doing, where they're going, and the value that they're going to get from going to that other location. The next thing you'll need to do is you'll need to use dynamic URL variables on your buttons, pass auth tokens or user IDs, product IDs, other information as that button is clicked from your backend to your store page. And what that allows you to do is that allows you to identify who that user is. You can pass own data about them from in the app, and it helps you track who that person is, what they're doing, and it helps with entitlements as well. And then, you can also use that to leverage segmentation data or, offer promotions or discounts as related to that user. The next step, you need to be able to process payments on your web store using payment methods that are familiar to your users. In the case of the United States, Apple Pay and Google Pay on their respective devices are extremely valuable. These are payment methods and wallets that people are using all the time, and they've already got their card saved in there. It's just a couple of taps. If this is being used in regions that are not in the United States, again, like Japan appears to be opening up soon, and other regions in the world like Brazil and India are talking about this, you'll also want to offer localized payment methods in those regions. And we'll talk a little bit more about localization. Finally, you'll need to communicate with back-end systems as the purchase is completed using things like webhooks or APIs to allow those in-app entitlements and then return your user back to the app. The benefit of working with a partner is you can have some help to do all of this, right? There's a lot of things here that could feel a little bit overwhelming. And we're going to talk a little bit more about all of these steps, and we'll go into a little more detail now. So what's the first step? We talked about this, adding that buy button in your app and passing that data to the checkout. So what a user will experience, you can see on the left an illustration here of an app that has a buy button. And I want to point out in this example, we have explicit, clear messaging that says buy direct, earn 50 bonus eggs. This is a gaming example, but it could be, get a special in-app access to a photo pack or a presets, or you could offer some other value, right? Get a month free if you sign up on the web, or pay 20% less, whatever that promotion is you want to run. You can be very explicit, very clear here. And so that user taps that buy direct button. And as I mentioned, your app is sending that quick message to your backend with the user and product details so you know who it is. Your backend is then going to check that user is valid, and it securely packages that purchase information and creates a special checkout link that includes a secure token and a return link to bring that user back to the app later. And then finally, when that app opens the link in the browser, the checkout page is reading the data in the link, confirms that it's valid, and starts a secure session for that purpose. All of this happens in less than a second. But all of this validation on the back end is extremely valuable because you know who that user is. And then it opens up the possibility for a checkout page where you can do a lot of great things. So let's move on to the next slide. So you now are embedding a checkout and you're processing your payments on the web. Your user has arrived, and what you can see on the right-hand side is an example of a checkout screen. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as your logo, what they're purchasing, and the payment methods that they're going to use. And they can follow through that payment flow. Now, the page has been securely initialized, as we mentioned, and your data is here, and it's running entirely on the web, where you can control your design, data collection, and the payment options that you're offering. And if you're trying to move quickly, right? Let's say I want to get a program stood up for Cyber Weekend, which is coming in about a month. You can just create a simple checkout page. You don't have to build a full web store experience in order to start monetizing on the web. So When you create that single checkout and that single web page, you're allowed to start collecting other valuable information about the users that are there. And this is where app to web steering gets really exciting. And as Jesse mentioned in our survey, that access to user data, email address and other things, you can begin to collect that on this page. Their email, as I mentioned, their location, their device type, and you can either put a simple login flow where you ask the users to log in and create an account and you capture their email address right there. Or if you're not ready to do that, you can embed and some analytics and tracking pixels on the page. And that enables you to do a lot of other things like audience building, remarketing, lookalike targeting across ad platforms while keeping that checkout experience seamless. And Jesse's going to talk a little bit more about the strategies you can deploy with some of this data in a few minutes. But I want to make sure that it's clear that this page can drive so much value to you where when you're just operating in the App Store, it can be very challenging to identify who these users are, what their email address is, and create a conversation with them. But by using these flows, you unlock a lot of that data. And so, as I mentioned, we're also giving payment methods that are relevant to that user, Apple Pay in this case, because they're on an iPhone or others. And then when that purchase is complete, they click place your order, they go through and make their payment, they'll be redirected back to the back end or back to your app. Now, meanwhile, the back end is receiving a webhook when that purchase is completed and letting your back end know the transaction is over and what needs to happen next. So let's move on to the next slide. So your backend receives that webhook or API and it says, I know who this person is because we're passing that user data, we're passing that product information. And your backend will then update your internal systems, like your economy or an entitlement service, depending on what was purchased and how you monetize. And that applies that purchase then to your user's account. And at that same time, your checkout is redirecting your user back to your app, usually through a deep link of some kind. And the app opens, it validates with your backend, and the entitlement happens. All of this can happen in as few as 10 or 15 seconds. I've taken quite a bit of time to explain everything, but the point here and the goal of this, in addition to collecting that user data and understanding who they are and driving value there for your users, is a smooth, secure loop where that user finishes their checkout on the web, your systems are automatically syncing, and that app reflects the purchase in near real time. And so it's a really great way to open up additional channels for your users, but it can feel a little bit complicated, right? Fortunately, when you partner with someone like us with FastSpring, and there's other vendors out there as well who do this, you get access to at FastSpring a tool we call SteerSafe. And SteerSafe is our approach to app-to-web steering that makes it simple for you to steer your users from your in-app experiences to that secure localized checkout that I just mentioned, and then back to your app all in a matter of seconds. It's backend agnostic, and so you can use this with whatever backend system you're using, and it will make it a lot easier to get something like this started. If you're interested, we'll talk more at the end about how you can contact us. But again, I want to hit that point one more time that even if you're not using FastSpring, and you should be considering app to web flows and how you can begin to monetize outside of these stores in the United States today, but in other regions around the globe. So I'll hand it back over to Jesse now to talk a little bit more about how you can begin to use some of that data and other marketing considerations for an app to web flow.
That was awesome. Thank you, Braden. If you're a developer right now and you're watching this, you were like deep into the weeds with Braden on the back and forth of the data flows. If you're a bit more on the monetization user act side, this may be where you want to lean in a bit more to the screen because I'm going to get into a little of the marketing side here. When I just wanted to take a minute based on what Braden just showed you to call out some marketing considerations as you're bringing people out of the app onto your web page and then back into the app. Design-wise, you want to go for consistency and simplicity. Ideally, the user doesn't even really realize that they're transitioning platforms. They're just completing a transaction. You want to reduce friction, maintain trust, And one of the best ways to do that visually with the user is just to keep the design consistent across those two experiences, or those two locations in the experience. The other one is simplicity. This is a transaction moment. We don't want to allow people to have a lot of off-road. So when you bring them into a web page where they're going to hit buy, as we saw in the GIF or the GIF, however you choose to say it, we don't want to give like menus and a lot of things where people can click off into other parts of the site. We want them to complete the transaction and go right back into the experience they were trying to do in the app. And then that increases and maintains sort of completion levels of your transactions. We'll talk a little bit later about some other types of pages you can drive traffic to, and that's where you want people to explore and engage. At this point, just get there, maintain trust, transact, and go back to the app as soon as possible. The other thing that I want to call out is localization. It's I think probably intuitive to most of us that we want to make sure currency is represented. Like, for example, when the ruling comes out in Japan, as it appears it will, the ability to show prices in Japanese yen versus USD, you want to be able to localize in your design and actually show that in the layout and in everything. So like even in the example on the right, you can see the euro symbol there. Also promotions. A classic example of this is, celebrating New Year's with a marketing campaign. If you're doing it globally, it means a different thing in China than it does in the UK. The date is different. The context is different. So the types of promotions you run can really be localized as well. And then, of course, language. If you have the ability to at least give language to your interface so that people understand where they're clicking and what they're doing, even if the deep product descriptions aren't translated, any amount of language localization will ease that user's ability to transact without any sort of internal friction or reluctance. And then I want to just call out conversion expectations as well on this. Anytime that you start introducing another step into a transaction flow, there is the possibility that there is a lowering of transaction completion rate. But you need to make sure you're analyzing this flow the right way, because what you're going to see is that the folks that do this are high intent. And then also, because they're giving you first party data, you have the ability to follow up and sort of make sure that people are engaged. You're doing churn mitigation. You're doing all the sorts of things to make sure that they stay around. And so your ARR, which stands for annual recurring revenue, and your retention rate are the key metrics to think about. Your long-term lifecycle value out of these users to really understand, are these folks providing more value to my business than direct app purchases? So we're going to get a little into the weeds. So hopefully this is helpful. I want to talk about first party data. You've got the data, and we're going to use it to drive better campaign results. Up on that data slide, it was the #1 value. And why is that? I want to talk about 2 channels, and I'll try and run through this fairly quickly, but feel free to drop some questions and we can get into it in the Q&A or the side chat if that's helpful. Ad targeting. Ad targeting, Braden, you described it really well. Putting that pixel or that script on that web page so that when the visitor uses, they kind of get added to an audience, and then you can do something with that. Ad targeting connects your first party data to ad platforms, so you can improve targeting, retargeting, and conversions. So I want to actually walk through the bullets on the right for a second here. So you can know which campaigns drive real conversions. And you can imagine that if you're driving traffic from, let's say, an Instagram ad over to your in-app purchase, you don't get to see which ad actually helped you convert, because it's coming from essentially a web experience into an Apple ecosystem where they're going to obfuscate that data. But if you can drive that traffic to that web page that Braden showed and convert there, or at least get engagement there, now I can actually see which campaigns are truly driving conversions. And if you're an ad manager, like this is the name of the game, is I've got 10 ad campaigns running. And if I'm getting 90% of my conversions out of just 2 of those campaigns, guess where I'm going to put all my budget? Into those 2 campaigns. And so being able to make those ad investment decisions really helps. You can actually, you just can do it now if you can see the data and the conversion path. The other thing you can do is automate smarter targeting. All these platforms, Google Ads, Meta, even LinkedIn for the B2B folks here, you can automate your smarter targeting, because those platforms have algorithms that when their algorithm can see that this particular user that sent over actually converted, which they can get that data feedback from the pixel or from the script, then it will say, great, I will go find you more people like that, because Google knows if it's a search ad, for example, that Google gets paid when it sends you converting traffic. And so it will go and do that. Third thing, you can retarget your visitors effectively. So people show up, they transact, or maybe they just visit, and you can then run specific ad campaigns to just that pool of people. So let's say you want to target everybody that subscribed in the first half of the year. In the second half of the year, you want to run ads that say, renew in 2026 for the best version of you, maybe for your meditation app or your workout app. You can target those people specifically with ads, so it shows up all over the web form, Instagram or whatever. And then you can create lookalike audiences from converted users. This is an old kind of technology from Facebook, but most of the platforms do it nowadays, which is you can actually say, here's a list of 1,000 people who bought my app. I want to advertise to people that look like this. And the real advantage there is you start your ad campaign from day one with a very targeted list, as opposed to most ad campaigns you shotgun and then optimize to get down to a good targeting. Lookalike audiences are a power move where you start day one with a real targeted list. I'm throwing a lot of data out, so please feel free to throw some questions in the chats or the question box over there. I'm going to keep cruising though. The second channel, and then we'll move on and kind of head towards our ending here. Second channel is email marketing. This connects your first party data to your email platform to personalize messaging, automate your journeys, re-engage customers. Like I said earlier, email is the primary piece of data that if you can get that, it's going to change your marketing, your user acq, your retention, your churn mitigation, all that stuff. So it allows a few things. You can personalize campaigns based on user behavior, purchase history. So like I just said, the subscription thing, you can email subscribers and say, let's renew. You're coming up on your 12-month mark or your 30-day mark or whatever it is. User behavior, if they engage but they haven't logged in 2 months and you want to try and re-engage them because you know that'll keep them as good subscribers. You can also automate onboarding, renewal, win-back flows. I guess I just talked about that a little bit. The win-back's worth calling out here. One of the problems with the marketplace kind of managing your users for you is you don't have the ability to go back out to them if they cancel and say, hey, let me give you an offer, or let me provide you value and maintain a relationship, so that maybe when you have the need again, you want to get back into meditating, you'll come back to me because we've been sort of talking, so to speak, in the email world in the interim. Segment users to deliver the right message at the right time. This might be sort of part of onboarding or part of re-engagement. You know who does this famously is Duolingo. Anybody who's used Duolingo knows they've really done an amazing job of gamifying the experience. And any process step you do or don't take is going to get an engagement from them. And so you can really move people down a journey, especially if you know that getting people to certain milestones is going to mean they stick around longer, like they fill out a profile, they engage with a certain piece of content, they download some certain feature. You can kind of move people to those places. And then again, measure conversion revenue. It's same thing as sort of the beginning of that ad slide a second ago. When you can see, because every email platform will give you metrics on all of these interactions, you can see which stuff is actually helping move the needle, and then just double down, and it becomes a sort of a methodology of optimizing towards the things that are going to really help your business. Very cool. Let's hand this back over to Braden to kind of take us into the home stretch here.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. So we've talked a lot about the App2Web in the United States and other potential regions in the future. But we also recognize, and it's really important for all of you to recognize, right? Not all of your users potentially come from the United States. And so how do you get ready for App2Web in the future in other regions? And what alternative flows can you use in other regions that aren't the United States, that aren't directly steering users from in-app to the web? Well, this is web to app. And to set the stage of this, we need to understand kind of what can you do and what's allowed in a region that's not the United States. This is a handy cheat sheet for you that explains a little bit more specifically about what you can and can't do under the terms of service of iOS and Android. For example, you're totally allowed to market your store outside of your app. This is really easy in mobile games because many games have a Discord or they've got a subreddit where players are talking. But for apps that don't have a community that's actively participating or communicating back and forth, it can actually be hard to get this message out. So that's where some of this other data that we're talking about with the steering, app-to-web steering, and also with web-to-app comes in handy, because you can start opening some of those communications and market your store directly to your users outside of your app. You're not allowed to embed third-party payments in your app. Not today. This may change in the future, but the way that you get around this is through the steering a user to an external web page. You're also you're allowed to put an in-app CTA that steers a user to a non-store page. And this is a really important distinction outside of the United States. Earlier, I talked about putting that messaging in the app that says, go buy online and see and get an extra 50 coins or get a month free for your subscription or whatever. If you're not in the United States, or excuse me, if your user is not in the United States, that's not allowed. And you can't be that explicit. However, you can tell them to go to a non-store page, and we'll talk a little bit more about what some of those pages can look like and some of that value in a moment. You're not allowed to send those users to your web store directly. You can't just put a page up that's a logo with a go to the web store, right? You need to be, that's in violation of the terms of service generally. And then finally, side loading can have an effect on how you integrate payments or other things if you're operating outside of these app stores. Not allowed on iOS today in most regions. On Android, it's currently allowed, but Google has signaled that they potentially may be taking side loading away soon. So take a screenshot of this. We'll share this deck out with you as well to help you see, keep this cheat sheet handy as you're thinking about these flows. But web to app is made up of two parts. You have on the one side, you have your non-payment pages. If you want to move to the next slide, please. Thank you. You have your non-payment pages, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then you also have your web store pages. If you're going to be doing a web to app flow, you have to have both of these. So let's talk about the non-payment pages and how you can give additional value to your users to encourage them to leave the app experience and go to your site for whatever reason. Number one, up at the top here, you've got additional free assets you could offer. Perhaps you offer some kind of template or a PDF, or maybe you have in-app themes that are different for them going to your site, other resource libraries. Maybe you want to build a community. You can put forums on your site. You can have some community showcases of things that your users are doing. Maybe you gamify like Duolingo does, and you could have some leaderboards or some other reason for them to leave that app experience. You could also offer loyalty rewards. For every time they log into your web store, you give them a loyalty currency for some unique in-app purchase or a badge of some kind. And there's other ideas, depending on the industry you're operating in, what you're offering, there's any number of things that you could do. But the point of all of this is you want to offer those meaningful features or services on your site so that users will be encouraged to go there. And when they get there, you can do the same type of tracking, the same type of analysis on their data that we talked about in the app-to-web flow. And once you have that data, that unlocks so many activities that of which Jesse just spoke about. So the other half of your web to app flow is your web checkout or your web store. And I won't go quite as exhaustive as I did with app-to-web steering, but I want to talk about the steps that you need to follow for this as well. So it's actually pretty similar from a checkout perspective of what you need. But the first thing you need is a product page with the products available to purchase for your customers. And if it's just a single product, maybe it is just a checkout page. But that's something you'll need to decide that how do you want to display that store to your users. Number two, you'll need to integrate that checkout experience directly into that page. So an interstitial pop-up checkout is actually really simple. It can be just a few lines of code to put something like that in. Or you can opt for an embedded checkout, which allows for a little more customization and places that payment flow directly into your interface and gives you a little more control than an interstitial pop-out would. You might also consider adding a cart if you have lots of add-on features or lots of different things that you want to offer your users. The next step is you'll need to be able to process those payments. Again, offering things like Apple or Google Pay if they're on a mobile device, or if your users interact with you on the desktop, maybe there's other payment methods that you want. And in the case of non-US web to app flows, localization of currency and payment method is extremely important. So you want to be able to, for example, in India, you want to be able to offer UPI for your customers. If a customer is in Germany, credit cards aren't actually that popular in that region. And so you want to offer services that are relevant to them. If they're in Brazil, Pix is the most popular payment method. So, depending on where you are, it's really important to open up your mind to understand what are the payment methods in these regions? How do users transact if they're not transacting in the App Store? Finally, you'll need to integrate with your backend systems for those entitlements. Typically, again, through the webhooks like we talked about earlier, to confirm those purchases, deliver subscriptions, unlock content, whatever that is. And then get your users back to your app as quickly as possible once they've made that purchase. So ultimately, when you integrate this well, it's going to feel, as we've talked about a couple of times, like a part of the whole experience. And it guides those users through payment effortlessly while handling all of the complexity behind the scenes. Now, I think Jesse mentioned this a minute ago, but I think it's really important to mention again that when you implement these web to app flows or app to web flows, it's possible you see a decrease in initial user conversions. However, if you look downstream, you're likely to see an increase in total revenue, average revenue per user, because these are high intent buyers. These are people who are less likely to churn on the web. And so don't be afraid if you implement this and you start to see a decrease in conversion rates. Look down funnel and see. And ultimately, your business will need to make the decision what works best for you and what doesn't work. But we have seen that story. So we'll hand it over to Jesse again.
Awesome. Thanks, Braden. One thing, just to stand that for a second, that was a real kind of aha for me, in this space. And just to say it explicitly, when you do app to web, you can go right for the transaction. What, Braden, you were just talking about for the last minute or two here is sort of more of a 1-2 punch, where you're like, I can't send you directly to my web store if you're in Spain. But what I can do is send you to a, one of those pages you listed, like a user form or something, where you'll give me your information, and then I can market to you to come back and transact. So it's a bit of a more 1-2 kind of combo punch on the, if you're not in one of these US or Japan or some of the other regions that'll open up soon. Cool. Whoops. Let me get into the right window to get us to our last slide here. So I think bottom line, it's not starting from the app or starting from the web. It's both. We want one connected e-commerce experience. I'm going to actually read this a little bit because I think this really kind of gives the final punchline well. App to web, getting started ASAP is a great thing, but it is not a standalone channel. It's additive. It's an additive layer to your app and web strategy. And then when you're using kind of both directional flows together, this is what unlocks new revenue, richer first-party data. You do one without the other, you're sort of leaving some element of growth on the table. So really viewing these as a cohesive strategy is the way forward. FastSpring does help you connect both sides. We help people convert more everywhere, so we'd love to kind of connect on that. But with that, I think we're all wrapped up, and we'll just leave this slide up for a second, and I believe we can transition to some Q&A time.
Great. All right. Thanks. That was really interesting, Jesse and Braden. One thing I took from it was it's not just about billing, but it's about, as you say, having this direct relationship with the user.
Yeah.
Not only with data, but also engaging them with different stuff on your own web store. I thought it was really interesting. And, that's really food for thought. All right. Well, we got a few questions. If you have a question, chuck it in the question box and we'll try and cover it now. We've got, I think, 5 minutes to do some questions. So let's get into that. Cool. Mary Weidner is asking, there's a bit of feedback there. Don't know if maybe that's coming from someone's maybe just turned down your volume there. Someone, yeah. She's saying, that's better. You must include the option to pay via the App Store, correct? Our B2B pricing doesn't work with App Store constraints, but my understanding is that the rulings still don't help with that issue.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this one. That is correct. For the most part, they have the reader apps segment, which includes like your Spotify's and others. So if you fall under that segment, you don't have to offer App Store as an option, App Store payments as an option. Otherwise, the ruling as it exists today, yes, is still required. So, however, you still could implement other options for your online pricing. It's hard to give a specific answer about your business. If you want to get in touch with our team, we'd be happy to understand a little bit more about what you're doing. But your first part is correct. You do still need to offer App Store pricing. So I would encourage you to think about what are ways that we could drive users to the web where you have a little bit more flexibility on how you package and position, and you could still offer some sort of App Store pricing. But again, the nuance will be in the details of your business and the model that you want to offer.
Okay,
You just
great.
got to make that App Store button like boring looking, faded gray, and your direct to app purchase path bright and shiny with GIFs going off. You just got to design it right.
Got it.
Brains like Jesse, that's not an option.
There we go. Next up, so Mohammed, he asked, he was pretty fast out the gate here with this question. He was asking specifically on Meta, which type of campaign are you using to promote this? Is it, I guess is it an app install type of app promotion campaign or more of a web campaign?
I can. Yeah, I can answer this one. Sales campaign is what you would drive to your web page, your web store, where you're going to transact, because it's going to be sort of a transaction, just like sort of any other e-commerce transaction. What you might do, I mean, to be totally blunt, what I would probably do is run both campaigns, send the app to web. I'm sorry, use the app promotion one to an actual app checkout, run a sales campaign to my web store, and then just measure results and really get a database view of, as you send different traffic to those two different locations, what happens. That's what I would do.
Got it. Hope that answers your question, Mohammed. And Oscar, you kind of touched on this with the credit card thing in Germany, but he's saying, what about direct carrier billing? Is that something you can be supported by this?
Yeah, direct carrier billing is an interesting payment method and alternative. Obviously, what you want to do is offer the payment methods that your users are engaging with the most. And direct carrier billing, it's something that people use. From the data that we've seen, it's actually pretty uncommon across the world as a payment method that's actively used to make purchases. It's a small fraction, even a percentage of 1%, 2%, maybe even less. So, but your point still stands, right? Like, it is a valid payment method if your users are engaging there. If there's a region that you're targeting that it's more popular in, you'll want to use a solution that offers direct carrier billing. However, again, it's not terribly common across the globe to use this as a payment method. And most users, if you don't have that payment method, are willing to make a purchase in other payment methods that are still familiar. For example, if they don't have a credit card, maybe they still have PayPal, or maybe they've got Amazon Pay or something else that they're still willing to use if it's not their first choice. So, but it's a valid question and an important point.
Great. Okay, I think that's it from if there's any final questions, let us know. I had a question which was, when you're implementing this, what's the ideal kind of team structure? Is it to have a small team with a developer, a marketer? What have you seen where this has worked well in terms of implementing it?
Yeah, I can tell you from the development side, there's a variety of ways folks have done this, right? If you have the capability on your own, whether that's staff internally or maybe you've done some web development, you're a single developer, implementing a solution like this is fairly simple. You'll need to understand how to do front end app development, and you'll need to have some understanding of back end development so you can communicate with that back end system. So whether that's one person or two people, We've seen it done with 2, right? 1 developer for each side. Or you can hire an agency to help you do this, or find some contractors to do this at a small, at a discounted rate to help you build this integration. And then there's also third-party services that help with this integration, out of the box as well. So there's a lot of options to do this. And then Jesse, on the marketing side, what are you seeing?
Yeah, you could do it with one person if they were sort of a generalist, like sort of a demand generation or growth marketing or user acquisition generalist. And then, or if you had the resources and you have a broader team that can handle individual channels like ads and then email and design and stuff. What I think that what your trade-offs become is just the speed with which you can run stuff, and then how many concurrent campaigns you can manage. So I can imagine if you had one person, you might say, step 1 is like, let's just do data tracking and get basic ad targeting set. And then next month, let's start looking at email flows. And then in month 3, and you kind of stage yourself out. If you have access to 2 or 3 people that you can get, target or focused on the project or on the app, then you just kind of accelerate your ability to start initiating those campaigns.
Great. All right. Well, I think you've brought a whole new lens to the topic today, different way of thinking about things, some great ideas. So thank you both very much. I think you mentioned if anyone wants to take next steps on this, let's go to fastspring.com/apps. And I think we've got a demo button there, the green button there, which if someone wants to chat a bit more, I imagine they can do that through there. Yeah.
Yeah, if you go to the schedule a demo, you'll get to a form where you can actually just set a meeting just to talk. Maybe I know, Braden, you offered on a few points there, like, hey, we could help you talk about your particular app. If you go to the fastspring.com/apps, you'll kind of get some general information on the business. But yeah, I would love to connect with you and be a resource as you figure out. In the poll, I took a look, James. I don't know if that shows or not, but overwhelming the responses were they're not yet doing, but they are planning to do App2Web. And so as most of us are in this research and figure out how to move forward stage, would love to help you out any way we can.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Jesse. Thanks, Braden, and hopefully see you again.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you all.
Thanks for joining us.